Highs 3rd to September 18th. Friday the 19th in the Western Pacific, and we still have several systems active in the tropics, primarily focused in the Western Pacific today, as all three of the systems that we discussed yesterday have now been named by the Japan Meteorological Agency. Going from left to right, we now have Tropical Storm Mitag in the South China Sea. The system is likely intensifying and could near typhoon intensity before coming into South China later today, local time. We've also got now Tropical Storm Ragasa. The Philippine name for this is Nando in the Philippine Sea. This system is likely to become a very strong typhoon, may become a super typhoon as it tracks very close to the northern Philippines and Taiwan, and from thereafter it'll enter the South China Sea, where it will likely threaten parts of southern China. We've also got in the open Northwest Pacific, Tropical Storm Neoguri way in the open ocean. We're not going to discuss this system today because really nothing has changed since yesterday's video, and the system is no imminent threat to land, at least throughout the next 5 days. And finally, we'll be talking about Tropical Storm Gabrielle in the tropical Atlantic, as the system could threaten Bermuda as we head into the latter half of this upcoming weekend and early next week. Okay, but starting things off in the Western Pacific, we're going to go left to right again with all our systems in detail here. Starting off with Mitag, now close to the south coast of China. The system has now rebounded from its planned interaction over Luzon. Like I talked about yesterday, it needed about a day to recuperate itself over the warm water over the South China Sea. It has now done that, and the shear has now decreased, and we are now seeing a marketable improvement in the convective structure of the system. As you can see on this infrared loop, we're now getting the so-called shrimp pattern, which is practically a curved band of thunderstorms that wraps around like this around the center of the storm. This is a classic sign of an intensifying tropical system because oftentimes this wraps into an eye wall structure, and from there on can lead to more significant intensification. Now, the good news is here for China is that the system is going to be limited in time. It only has about 6 to 12 hours before it reaches the coast, and that will heavily limit how much intensification we see. And it's going to be very good news because with this kind of a pattern, this typically does preclude more rapid intensification. So we may be avoiding what could have been way worse compared to if the system had another day, say, over water before landfall. But if you look at the waterfront imagery, you can see the pattern has changed like we talked about it would. The upper low that was north of the system yesterday is now just west of it, and it's on the eastern side of this. So the flow around this upper low is now aligned with where the storm is going. And we also see these milky white cirrus clouds rotating in a clockwise fashion, indicating high pressure that's also forming aloft over Mitag, showing a low shear environment and good divergence aloft to the north and to the south as well, which is pretty telling why we have this good convective structure right now. Now, like I talked about, it's going to be heavily limited onto how much intensification it can get before landfall, about 6 to 12 hours before we get to landfall. In the Hong Kong Weather Office forecast a severe tropical storm of this. Is it possible that we see the system just get to typhoon intensity by landfall? That is within the realm of possibility, but it's not really going to change all too much between a severe tropical storm and a typhoon. Strong winds are expected along the coast as this comes in, alongside storm surge there in east of the landfall point, and heavy rainfall will continue across the zone as the system gradually bends back towards the southwest, as you can see on this forecast. But that's not the only system we have to talk about for southern China, and now we're getting to the big one, as this is likely the most significant tropical cyclone that we're going to have for the next 2 weeks globally, because this system is likely, which is named Ragasa now, again, the Philippine name is Nando, I'm going to be calling it by the international name. The system is likely to intensify significantly, and like I mentioned, could become a super typhoon as it tracks west, getting very close to Taiwan and the northern Philippines. If we take a closer look at the system right now, we can see the system has improved some since yesterday, as it is now a tropical cyclone, but it is sheared for now. We can see in this visible or infrared loop, rather, some of these milky white cirrus clouds coming out of the northwest. If we look at water imagery, we can see the two culprits behind this. We have an upper trough, fairly weak upper trough, but it is here just east of Taiwan, and we have an area of high pressure draped directly on top of Mitag, and between these we have a fetch of northwesterly flow coming down here towards Ragasa, and so this is imparting a bit of northerly shear upon the storm. And for now, this seems to be holding the system back from intensifying significantly, but this is going to be changing pretty quickly over the next day or so. As first, we're going to begin to see some of this convection try to wrap up shear onto this northern side, but it's going to be aided by this upper trough because this is now starting to move quickly down to the south. And while it is shearing the storm right now, it's eventually going to open up and give the system a little bit of a kick, the environment to allow the system to intensify very significantly. We can see this out play out if we look at the GFS. If we go back to the initialization, you can see here's that little trough. Here's Ragasa now, and you can see again, here's that northwesterly flow between this ridge and that trough, and that's what's shearing the system right now. But as we go in time, this trough is quickly backing to the south and southwest. And so once we get to Friday evening into Saturday morning, now the storm is on the eastern side of this upper trough as it continues diving southwest. So you see a marketable improvement in the northern outflow channel to the north. And what this indicates is a decrease in that northern shear vector. And as this upper low decays away, we then see a very expansive high pressure system form directly on top of Ragasa by this point. And really by this point, the wind shear is very low, and the system is really set to intensify as much as it wants to, barring any structural hindrances that may occur as the system does intensify. We can see how this may happen if we look at the HAPS model, which is a Typhoon specialized model. And you can see right now the lopsided structure that we have with much of the strongest winds on the southern and eastern side with that northwesterly shear vector. But as we go in time, and you can see this upper low really starts to favor it by 18Z on Friday, so 30 hours out. We'll go 30 hours out on here, and we see that that convection wraps around onto the north side of the system. And this would be a much more organized system getting ready to intensify, likely by this point building an inner core structure, that being an eye wall. And by that point, we see the system begin to intensify much more quick on the HAPS model. Now, the HAPS model is one of the most aggressive models that we have showing intensification with this system, going to all the way to a super typhoon. If you're looking for a Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale equivalent, this would be a category 5, what the model is showing. Now, there's a lot that can stop a category 5 from happening. One thing is it depends on how the eye is size-wise when it wraps up, because right now this is fairly broad right now with the system center right now. And when this convection wraps around, it may wrap into a broader eye, and that may stop it from intensifying to this degree. Now, if we see a tighter eye form out of this, then maybe something like this may come, more of a probability. But also there can be structural changes internally within the cyclone that can stop it from getting this strong. Now, the key message is, even though it may not be, this strength category 5 equivalent, it will likely be very strong by the time it's coming through the Luzon Straits or near northern Luzon or the southern Taiwan. Models are in unanimous agreement on that, and this is the current forecast from Pagasa, and it does show a typhoon right now, but they do note in their discussion that this has a possibility to become a super typhoon. They have mentioned the possibility of needing signal 5 warnings wherever the system's core comes through in the Philippines. Now, there is some track uncertainty, and this comes important for the South China Sea part of the storm's track. You can see that right now the center track is directly in between the Philippines and Taiwan. That's the model consensus right now, but there is some wiggle room in that. If we go a little bit further north, we may see Taiwan get the direct impact of that, and that may impact the core strongly. That may weaken it for China further down the line. Same way in the Philippines, it could come further south, and it could impact Luzon directly. Now, for China interests, if it comes into Luzon, it would have more time over water, so perhaps a greater risk there of a stronger system. But for now, the forecasts, most forecasts that I've seen have this going in between these two land masses. And if that's true, the system will likely not be impeded too much because it's not interacting with high terrain. And you can see on the HAPS model, we really don't see much weakening occur from that point on. It may weaken some small because it does get larger in size as a storm naturally tends to do with time. But this is still a very powerful typhoon. And the weather office in Hong Kong, I can show you it here, they forecast this to be a super typhoon coming very close to southern China. And there is a lot of track uncertainty on where it exactly could make landfall here. But for areas especially like Hong Kong, this is absolutely something to watch because right now a lot of models are tracking this in a way that would take it very close to the metro area. And that would be really, really very bad. If we have a very strong storm coming in there. So hopefully we can see, some structural issues hold the system back intensification wise. But as of right now, models are again in unanimous agreement that we're likely going to see this intensify very significantly. So this very much needs to be taken seriously if you're in Taiwan, the Philippines, and southern China, and stay closely tuned to local weather offices, which I will leave links to at the top of the description, so you can stay up to date on everything with the system as it evolves. And I will continue to have videos on this system as it tracks towards the west and intensifies over the next several days. Okay, finally, we're moving back to the Atlantic as we have to talk about tropical storm, in quotes, tropical storm Gabrielle. The system has made some improvement since yesterday. We talked about yesterday that the system was likely not a tropical cyclone because the center of circulation was not well defined enough, although you could argue it had met marginally the convective organization requirements that you need for a tropical system. But today we have sort of just flipped the coin on that. We're the complete opposite, to where now the center has actually gotten pretty good. You can see we have a tighter circulation that has developed, but there's really no convection to speak of with the system. And this is because we have a lot of dry air within the environment surrounding Gabrielle. And it's possible, and NHC has noted this, that the system does become a remnant low later today if it does not fire any convection. Now, the tighter circulation does likely give Gabrielle some more of a fighting chance going forward, as we talked about with the GFS being fairly weak with it yesterday, not showing this tighter circulation developing. And certainly if we didn't get this tighter circulation developing, I'd say Gabrielle would have probably been done by this point. But with this tighter circulation, and I'll pause it here so we're not looking at those flashing frames, as the winds around this low rotates over this very warm water, which is progressively getting warmer as it tracks towards the west-northwest, it's beginning to pick up more and more moisture off of the ocean surface. And as the shear begins to decrease over the next day to day and a half, this should begin to refire some convection to try and re-moisten the environment surrounding the area of flow pressure immediately. And so for the next day, we're probably going to be a very sloppy tropical storm. But as we get into this weekend, by this point, the shear is lightened. You can see today with all these blue colorings, that's some pretty strong vertical shear impacting the system directly. But even by tomorrow afternoon, we see a lot of that blue disappear, and there may still be some southerly flow between this upper low and this upper high, but it's much weaker. And by this point, we'll likely start seeing some little pops of convection fire up around the system center. And those little pops, they will look pretty pitiful tomorrow, but they will, over time, likely re-moisten the environment. And once it gets into this more favorable environment further north west, it will likely be able to reform into a tropical storm if it has degraded into a remnant low. And then models are now in agreement that the system will likely intensify into a hurricane as it tracks northwest and staying east generally of Bermuda. And you can see that on the GFS, it has come up significantly from its forecast yesterday, not anymore showing the system being practically dead throughout its entire model run. And this upper low, while it is initially shearing the system, through Friday into Saturday, it's a similar case to what we talked about with our West Pacific systems. It's getting in an orientation as it starts to turn towards more of the north. That's where this upper low flow is aligned with where the storm is tracking, so that decreases the vertical shear, but also you can see it has this zone of stronger flow between this low and this upper high, and so this may help some divergence a little bit, and so that might be another kick to help Gabrielle reform itself. But after that, you can see this upper level high pressure system develops directly on top of it, and it begins to tap into the jet stream. And so we see significant intensification occur. Now, for interest in Bermuda, you can see this is rather close to the island. This is not too far. If we get a measurement, that's about 200 kilometers east of the island. A lot of models get this rather close to the island. Now, the consensus today does still have this staying east of the island, but I put some caution in that because we could see some deviation west still in the forecast track. You technically are not in the forecast cone, but we still could see some westward shift that may get the storm uncomfortably close, even more so than this, to the island. Now, even regardless of that, we do still have the potential for some impacts with this because even though this forecast cone does not show Bermuda in the forecast track, potentially, this is not the impact cone. This is only showing you where the center could track, and impact will likely spread outside of this forecast cone. So you can see the probability of tropical storm force winds is an elevated probability here for the island, now 20 to 30%, and that may fluctuate some over the next few days as models try and get the right tune onto exactly when the system is going to begin to recurve off to the north. And if we do get uncomfortably close, even more so than this, with a stronger hurricane, that could mean the eye wall gets very close, and that could lead to some very significant impacts. But this is still absolutely something to watch in Bermuda going forward, and stay tuned to National Hurricane Center advisories as they're going to continue updating this. Even if it does go to a remnant low today, I'd imagine they're going to continue issuing advisories on this, given the forecast later down the line. And really, beyond Gabrielle across the Atlantic, there's not too much to discuss. There is a tropical wave that's marked with a 20% chance of development over the next 7 days, but the system is also going to be dealing with a lot of dry air out here. So it's uncertain if that system is actually going to form, and you can already see this kind of trajectory right now. It will likely be gaining some latitude. So for now, nothing really to pay attention to with this tropical wave, and nothing really across the western Atlantic, as we have, as you can see in this millibar flow across the map. We have a deep trough sitting over the Gulf of Mexico right now, and this is shearing apart anything that tries to form, even if it comes out of the Western Caribbean. So after Gabrielle, things may quiet down a bit, but we'll continue to watch the Western Pacific as things light up, of course, over the next week. That's all that I've got for today. I'll have more videos primarily on Ragasa over the next few days, as Mitag is going to be moving inland and Neoguri is no imminent threat to land over the next few days. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.